Madonna. To the world, she was never just a singer. She was an icon. But have you ever wondered? Behind the dazzling lights that captivated millions on stage, what was really there? Was it only music that made her the queen of pop? Or were there secrets hidden behind the curtain that no one dared to tell? Imagine a young woman in the early 1980s, arriving in New York with almost no money in her pocket, singing in small bars, dancing, trying to carve out a place for herself. No one could have predicted that just a few years later, she would become one of the biggest stars, not only in America, but in the entire world. But Madonna was never just another artist. She was a force who always knew how to push boundaries, shock people, and stay in the spotlight. So how did Madonna rise from being an unknown girl to dominating the biggest stages in the world? Was it purely her talent, or was it also her intelligence and strategy? Perhaps both. Because Madonna never limited herself to just singing. She turned herself into a brand. Through her fashion, her dance moves, her provocative music videos, she knew how to say, "I'm here and you can't ignore me." When Like a Virgin was released, the world practically exploded. For that time, the lyrics, the imagery, and her boldness on stage divided people. Some adored her, others criticized her harshly. But pay attention. Everyone was talking about her. And that was Madonna's true power. Capturing attention. But here's the question. Did Madonna do all this only to stay popular? Or was there a bigger message? Was she making a feminist statement? Was she fighting for women to have control over their own bodies and lives? Or was it all part of the game of fame? Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Madonna didn't just make music. She battled with society's values. She challenged the Catholic Church. She spoke openly about sexuality and freedom. Even her clothes sent shockwaves. Many thought what she did on stage was too much. But that was the point. Madonna pushed the limits, because without pushing boundaries, you can't stay at the top. And not just in music. Madonna was also a savvy businesswoman. She negotiated fiercely with record labels, making sure her interests came first. She became a fashion icon, and she reinvented herself again and again. One decade it was bold stage shows. Another it was mysticism and spirituality. No matter the era, she stayed relevant. Now think about it. A career that has lasted nearly 40 years. Who else has stayed at the top for that long? Why did so many artists fade away after a few years, while Madonna is still a headline? What was her secret? Was it the fearlessness in her songs, her intelligence, or the messages she sent to society? Looking at her story, you can't help but ask, was she really just a pop star? Or was she part of a cultural revolution? Because her life was more than music. It was the spirit of an era. And in this video, we're going to uncover the hidden sides of Madonna, the truths behind her rise, and the battles she fought behind the spotlight. Keep watching, because this is a story you've never heard anywhere else. Madonna's career development is perhaps one of the most striking chapters in pop music history, because here, we don't just see the rise of an artist. We witness the bold fight of a woman standing against the whole world. The mid-1980s. Like a Virgin is playing everywhere. Whenever Madonna steps on stage, it's not just a concert. It's an event. The clothes, the dances, the words, all became a manifesto for the youth of that time. But here's the real question. Could that kind of courage stay only on stage? Or did she have to carry that same boldness into every part of her life? For Madonna, there was no boundary between stage and real life. The more freely she expressed herself, the more criticism she received. But instead of being crushed by those criticisms, she turned them into advantages. So, what do you think? Was Madonna's greatest power her voice? Or was it her fearless attitude of standing tall against everyone? The Like a Prayer era is a great example. The religious imagery in the music video outraged the church. Sponsorship deals were canceled. Politicians demanded she be banned. But at the same time, the song shot to #1 on the charts, and Madonna grew even stronger. So here's another question. Did Madonna deliberately choose scandals to stay in the spotlight? Or was she just doing what felt natural, and the world chose to call it a scandal? By the 1990s, things only got bigger. With Vogue, she transformed dance culture. With Express Yourself, she reminded women of their own power. With Erotica and the Sex Book, she sparked global controversy. But this raises another question. Was Madonna simply making music, or was she openly challenging society's rules? At the time, especially for female artists, there were strict lines. This is what you can do, and this is what you can't. But Madonna ignored those lines completely, and that's why she became a source of inspiration for millions of women. In fact, many younger artists, Lady Gaga, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, were directly influenced by her. So, do you think the freedom we see in pop music today has its roots in Madonna's courage? But let's not forget, Madonna wasn't just about controversial videos and songs. Her stage performances also pushed boundaries. The 1990 Blonde Ambition Tour is still considered one of the most revolutionary tours of all time. Corsets, crucifixes, religious symbols. It felt more like a theater production than a concert, and the world couldn't stop talking about it. In those moments, Madonna wasn't just a singer, she became a cultural icon. Of course, success brought loneliness. The press constantly followed her private life, splashing her relationships across headlines, exaggerating even her smallest moves. So how does a person survive under that kind of pressure? Maybe one of Madonna's greatest strengths was this: turning pressure into power. Her life also had breaking points: marriages, divorces, children, all lived out in the public eye. Yet every time she managed to return to the stage. Was that simply the result of her discipline? Or was it driven by a deeper sense of defiance and ambition? In the 2000s, Madonna shifted toward electronic music. Songs like Music and Hung Up introduced her to a new audience. Once again, she reinvented herself. While many artists get stuck in one era and fade away, Madonna kept returning with a new face. So let me ask you this: is a true legend someone who stays the same forever, or someone who constantly reinvents themselves? When we look at Madonna's career development, one thing stands out. She was never just an artist. She put her life on stage. And that's why millions, when they looked at her, didn't just see a singer. They saw their own struggles, their own fight for freedom. That's why we can say this: Madonna's story is not only the story of the music industry, it's also the story of freedom, courage, and constant reinvention. And maybe the reason she's still being talked about today is exactly that. When we look at Madonna's story, we're not just seeing the career of an artist. We're witnessing how one woman managed to stand tall against the toughest pressures in the world, how she constantly reinvented herself, and how she broke the rules to carve her own path. That's why telling Madonna's life is also telling the story of an entire era, its culture, its changes, and a generation's search for freedom. And here's the fascinating part: Madonna is still on stage, still being talked about. How many artists get to have such a long-lasting career? Is it really enough to see her only as a singer? Or was she, in many ways, a movement, a phenomenon, a statement in herself? Think about it. In the 1980s, a young woman stepped onto the stage saying, "I'll dress how I want, I'll dance how I want, I'll sing how I want." Back then, those words were a far bigger challenge than they sound today. Madonna turned that challenge into her way of life. And that's why she became not just the queen of pop, but also a symbol of freedom and rebellion. So what do you think her greatest legacy is? The songs, the stage shows, or the bold messages about living life on your own terms? Share your thoughts in the comments, because everyone will have a different answer. Another point is this: Madonna taught us something important. A true artist never stays the same. They evolve, transform, take risks. One day she's shocking the world with Like a Virgin. Then she's shaking religious symbols with Like a Prayer, and later she's taking over the dance floor again with Hung Up. Isn't her ability to constantly change the very reason she's still relevant and discussed today? And maybe we should ask ourselves this too. If there had been no Madonna, would artists like Lady Gaga, Beyoncé, or so many others have been able to rise the same way? Or did they step onto a stage where many barriers had already been broken down? Maybe that's Madonna's true influence. Now let's get to the key part. At the end of this video, I want to ask you something. If Madonna's story inspired you, made you question something in your own life, then please don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing more of these untold and unforgettable stories with you. And don't just write great video in the comments. Tell us, what do you think was Madonna's biggest turning point? Which of her songs, words, or stage performances touched you the most? And of course, which celebrity story do you want us to cover next? Your suggestion might be the hero of our next video. Madonna's story isn't over. In fact, maybe the real story is still being written today, because she's not only a legend of the past, she's still a figure who millions are talking about, debating, and drawing inspiration from. And that reminds us of one thing: true legends never die. They are reborn in every generation.